What's up, you guys? We're talking UFC Vegas 103.
Lock and load.
Somewhat of a pedestrian card that's taken place over at the UFC Apex. But I will say this, the main event carries some serious implications for the future of the flyweight division. I think you can argue this is a title eliminator fight here between Manel Kape and Asu Almabayev. Almabayev replaces Brandon Royval and Kape. I mean, the winner of that fight, you have to believe he would have been next to fight Pantoja after Pantoja faces off with Haqparast, which is in the works to be the co-main event of UFC 314. Now, there have been some rumors that if Pantoja defeats France, that he may be looking to bump up to the bantamweight division and face off with Merab Dvalishvili. I don't really have too much to say about that. We got to see more smoke, okay, before we're talking about that fight. I mean, that's a fight that would be very exciting. I would love to see it, but I think that there's some work for Pantoja to do down in this weight class. I know he's been defeating a lot of the same fighters over and over, but there's some new blood that's working its way towards the top here. And if Kape wins this fight, I mean, that's the new blood there. And the same could be said for Almabayev. If Almabayev wins this fight, I mean, he's a new contender. Other than that, if Pantoja is patient, there are other exciting matchups to be made down the line. Let me just highlight some of these fighters real quick. Tager Ulanbekov has been going out there winning fight after fight. That's a fight that could be made in the near future. Besides Tager, you have fighters like Joshua Van, who will be taking on Ray Ciura on March 8th. Joshua Van is very young, but he's a beast. That's a fight I would love to see down the line. Let me just highlight Rafael Esteban, who came through for us on a big 8-unit maxer in a 2-team parlay recently. And then we have Ramazan Temirov, which, he's taking on Charles Johnson on this card. I know that that's very premature to even mention him, but I'll be talking about him here in a little bit. That dude's a phenom. And Charles Johnson has been an absolute tear as well. And I understand that a lot of those fighters still need to do more to be brought up in that conversation. But if you look at the timing, Pantoja goes out there, defeats France. By the time he does that, he takes on the winner of this fight. You have to believe that if Kape wins this fight, he is more than deserving of fighting for the belt. If he would have won that Muhammad Mokaev fight, he would have been on a 6-fight winning streak. That fight went to a split decision. It was very awkward. He broke his toe right in the beginning of the fight. I still think he potentially should have got the nod in that fight. It was an awkward one, okay? But he would have been fighting for the belt then. If he goes out here and defeats Almabayev, he has to be deserving of a shot after France. And by the time that all takes place, all these young contenders will have carved the name out even deeper in the game for themselves. So just to kind of highlight what's going on in the flyweight division, you guys know I love this division, and things will shape out for it. Okay, so that's it for the preview. Just want to say, guys, if you can, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel if you're new here. We're going to break down every single fight throughout this card. We're going to start with the first fight, work our way up towards the main event. We're going to dissect the betting odds and all that. If you can, also go give me a follow on my social media. That will be popping up below under me. Go follow me on Instagram, man. I'm creeping up on that 10K mark. I'm fighting to get to that 10K mark. It's been tough. If you can help me out there. And if anyone wants to get a hold of me, shoot me a DM on IG, Twitter, or you can email me as well. If you're interested in working with me for my official plays, do not hesitate to reach out. All right, guys, let's go jump into the first fight.
The teller.
In the featherweight division, we have Ricardo Ramos taking on Chepe Mariscal. And I have to be the first to admit that I was wrong on my thoughts of who Mariscal was as a fighter as he came into that UFC debut fight against Trevor Peek. Okay, now I was greatly impressed by his performance in that fight, and I did jump on the train after that. We did target him as an underdog against Jack Jenkins after that. Okay, but we've seen that he is a very complete fighter since he's made his UFC debut, okay? He has great judo and grappling skills. He has solid striking. He's very technically sound anywhere the fight goes. He could wrestle. He can get on top of you. He could smash you a ground and pound. And the real X factor I believe that he brings into the cage is that he's a real fighter, okay? He's a natural fighter. If there's one flaw that we've seen from him, though, and part of the reason why I was skeptical about him going into that fight against Peek is that he does tend to get KO'd. You take a look at his 6 losses. He's been KO'd in 3 of them. Now, in retrospect, not that we didn't have this information back then, but as we see him really show who he is in the cage, okay, we kind of dissect those losses maybe in a little bit of a different light. Look at the level of competition that he had in all of those losses, right? He got knocked out by Steve Garcia, Joe Anderson Brito, and then Gregor Gillespie. And even when you take a look at some of his other losses, like the Bryce Mitchell loss that took place over at V3 Fights, I mean, these are respectable names that he's lost to. The Sean Seriano one was one that kind of alarmed me a little bit. I know he was a former UFC fighter, but I never really was that high on Sean Seriano, the Team Killclef product. And all of that's in the past now. He is a proven high-level UFC caliber fighter, and now he's taking on Ricardo Ramos. How do we see this fight taking place? One thing you got to note is Ricardo Ramos, even though some of us look at him like he's this big KO artist, he only has 3 knockouts out of his 17 victories. And the reason why some of us look at him like this very dangerous striker is because since he signed with the UFC, he has 2 spinning back elbows that he's landed, okay? And he landed them in devastating fashion, right? When you think of the knockouts that he had most recently against Danny Chavez, hit him with that in the first round, and then also what he did to Ayman Zahabi back in 2017, right? He throws a lot of spinning attacks. If Mariscal can avoid being landed on big in that fashion, I expect Mariscal to be a step ahead. And I just want to highlight his last victory over Joshua Culibao. That was a fight where Culibao had him hurt throughout it. Culibao made some horrific mistakes in the fight. He should have easily had the W there. He ended up tripping over his shoelaces and being on his back for an entire round that cost him there. But that's a fight I really believe he wins the vast majority of times. And I think that Mariscal is a more balanced and a better version of a fighter than Culibao is. Okay, so just to kind of get an understanding of what's going on there, he just needs to avoid being KO'd. He'll push the pace throughout this fight. I mean, you take a look at the numbers here. He's been landing 4.75 strikes per minute. Okay, he will be the aggressor. Even if this fight is entertaining and they're going back and forth, there will be Mariscal that will be out-voluming Ramos, and he will be landing the heavier shots, and you should expect to even see him be on top at some points in time, laying down some ground and pound. All right, if you just want to briefly mention the submission threat of Ricardo Ramos, which is where he has the vast majority of his finishes, Mariscal has never been subbed. He trains with some of the best fighters in the game around this weight. I know he's been getting in some recent work with Tatsuro Taira, which let me shout him out as well. Remember, he lost a fight that came down to 1 round against Brandon Royval. That's another fighter that can get a couple victories here in the near future and be pushing for a title shot in regards to the flyweight division. But Mariscal has been training with Tatsuro Taira. He's also been training with Brandon Royval. Okay, so kind of interestingly enough. And he surrounds himself with high-level talent. He should be okay here. Let's take a look at the betting line. He is over a 4-1 favorite right now. Okay, he's right around a minus 430. This line's pretty damn steep, but it's steep for a reason. If you're backing him, you're really just hoping that he doesn't get caught with that one-shot kill from Ramos. So the line's understandable. I would lean towards it being a little high. I mean, that's a big line there. But I like Mariscal. I really do. Maybe this is something you want to mix into a 2-team parlay or a 3-team parlay for you wild boys out there, or for you crazy scoundrels. If you're looking to throw it in an 8-team parlay, here's a leg for you. If you're looking to do something like that, reach out to me through email, IG, or Twitter. Let me get you my referral link for BetUS. You'll get a 150% match on your first 3 deposits. And then you guys could do all those types of wild parlays that I know some of you guys like to do. I don't advise them. I like to keep more grounded, stick to the straight plays, 2-team parlays at most. But I get it. You guys like your lotto tickets. And BetUS is the real deal, guys. Reach out to me if you're looking to sign up. In the bantamweight division, we have the 39-year-old Douglas Silva de Andrade taking on the 33-year-old John Castañeda. I definitely wanted to start things off by highlighting their ages, because being 39 in this weight class is ludicrous, especially when you look the way that Douglas looks. I mean, this guy takes very good care of his body. There's no question about that. And he still has had some impressive performances up in age. And you take a look at his losses, it's always against high-level fighters, right? Miles Johns, okay, I mean, take that one for what you will, but he's been making some noise, guys. Besides that, Said Nurmagomedov, Lerone Murphy, Piotr Jan. Back in the day, he lost to Rob Font. Rob Font was the only fighter to have ever submitted him. He caught him in a guillotine choke there. And that was like a prime Rob Font back in 2017. And he also lost to Zabira Tukigov, which Tukigov dissipated from the sport. But we know he's a decent Dagestani fighter, okay? And that was his UFC debut fight. So it's really hard to put your finger on exactly who Douglas Silva de Andrade is or was as a fighter. He's had some big wins, of course, highlighted by the Marlon Vera victory he had back in 2018. I know Vera was still maturing as a fighter, but that's a solid name there. Sergey Morozov is an underrated fighter. Not too many people really know about him, but you take a look at his resume. I don't know why he stopped fighting, but his only losses came by way of very high-level names like Umar Nurmagomedov. He's a well-rounded fighter. He went out there, submitted him. The Cody Stamen victory was a good one. And then in regards to John Castañeda, yes, he's 21-7. He's been fighting in the UFC for a little bit now, but when you really dissect his resume, yeah, he has the Miles Johns submission, which no doubt about it, that was the highlight of his career, caught him in an arm triangle choke, and I understand he has some submission skills mixed in with the wrestling pedigree. I know he wrestled over at Minnesota, but I'm really not that high on him as a fighter, and there's nothing that really stands out throughout his resume to me, and he's coming off a fight against Daniel Marcos where he was really outclassed on the feet. Okay, in the striking department, there's really not too much to talk about there, and I think that Douglas can get the better of a striking affair. And the thing you also want to take note is Douglas is not easy to be taken down. Okay, he has posted throughout his UFC career 72% takedown defensive ratio, and you see it on tape. I'm telling you guys. Okay, he's light on his feet. He's very agile, and I don't know if Castañeda is going to be able to just take him down and hold him down and find that sub. He's only been subbed once before, and I think this fight should take place in the feet. If there's one thing that I am worried about in backing Douglas, which I think you guys know I'm going that way, the thing that I don't like is the fact that he is 39 years old, and you would expect to see that decline in performance. I mean, there's just no question about it. And we've seen a little bit of decline in the volume that he puts out. So if Castañeda comes into this fight motivated and can push the pace, I could see him sneaking by even in a stand-up type of fight. But I would lean towards Douglas if I have to make a decision, even in that type of atmosphere. I think that Douglas can land impactful shots. If we see a knockout in this fight, we have seen Castañeda knocked out twice before, and we've seen Douglas Silva de Andrade land some nasty KOs before. Okay, he has just 5 KOs, but you take a look at the unknown type of victories, 19. Okay, all those fights taking place early on in the regional scene in Brazil. I'm sure the vast majority of those are KOs, okay? So these 5 KOs, these are more recent fights that have taken place in the UFC. We've seen him land some big strikes before. I mean, the spinning back fist that he landed on Henry Briones was nasty, okay? But if we see a knockout take place, I would favor it more towards the Douglas side, and I'm going to pick him to win this fight, and especially with where the betting line is, okay? He opened up right around like a plus 145, and right now we're seeing him right around a plus 175, okay? There's been a lot of action coming in on Castañeda, who's now a minus 225. He opened up around a minus 185. I think it has a lot to do with the age of Douglas. I expect to see a very motivated Douglas coming off of the Johns loss, and I just think he also shows more fight when he's in the cage. Castañeda, in that last match against Marcos, he just didn't seem to be mentally there, and what happens if that same version of fighter shows up for this fight and you're chalking up minus 225 on him? I'm not in agreement with that line. I like the value on the dog. Charles Johnson was not happy when he got the news he was going to be taking on Ramazan Temirov here. And I understand why. Okay, you could look at it 2 different ways. Charles Johnson is ranked number 12th in this division. He's been grinding throughout the years, and now he's taking on a fighter that's unranked. He's just 1-0. And Temirov, he hasn't really carved his name out in this division just yet. Okay, so Johnson wants those bigger fights, and you could definitely say he's deserving. So, all right, he's 34 years old. He doesn't have a lot of time left in the game. He comes into this fight on a 4-fight winning streak, had that huge comeback knockout against Joshua Van. Before that 4-fight winning streak, he was on a 3-fight losing skid. He really had his back up against the wall against Azat Maxim. He delivered there. I understand where he's coming from, okay, but another way you could look at it, maybe he wasn't so excited for this matchup based on the fact that Temirov is nasty. I really believe that he's going to prove to be the real deal. I think that all those knockouts that he was having outside of the UFC are not coincidental. I don't look at them as they're just low-level matchups. I mean, he is a fight finisher. He's getting fighters out in the first round, left and right. He's super explosive. I think that he's a lot more well-rounded than he's getting credit for, at least at this point. He's not just a knockout artist. I think that he is going to be very hard to take down and control. I think that he has a well-rounded skill set, and people don't want to fight this guy right now. Okay, that's the word that I'm getting. And if I'm Johnson, what I'm doing in this fight is I'm looking to drag it to the later rounds. I'm looking to clinch heavy. I'm looking to use my footwork and just really avoid a lot of heavy early exchanges in the first round, because if you play that game, there's a better chance you're going to be getting knocked out than Temirov getting knocked out, which both fighters have never been KO'd. That makes it interesting as well. But Temirov, dude, don't play with that fire. I'm telling you guys right now, Johnson is the more proven fighter when you take into regard the level of fighters that he's been fighting, when you think about the overall skill set that he has shown in the UFC too, right? We've seen him take fighters down, use ground and pound to get them out of there, like in the Jimmy Flick fight. We've also seen him land some knockouts on the feet, not a lot, but we talked about the counter KO that he caught on the very talented Joshua Van there late in that fight. Most importantly, we know he has a proven gas tank. We saw him dig extremely deep in that Joshua Van fight, not only showing that he has good cardio and that he can dig deep late in fights, but that he can get a knockout on you too. Okay, so he's more proven in that regard. Okay, guys, but here's the issue. Temirov, I don't know. I really like what I'm seeing from him, and I have a gut feeling that he's going to land some devastating strikes early on in this fight and maybe get that early KO. But even if he doesn't, I say that he inflicts more damage throughout the fight, and I actually think that as the fight goes to the later rounds, he'll prove to have very good cardio, and he'll prove that he's a good grappler. Okay, he'll show to be a well-rounded fighter. I'm in on Temirov. I know he's a little undersized. Charles Johnson's going to have about a 6-inch reach advantage. He's about 5 inches taller or so. I know there's a huge length advantage for Charles Johnson, but that's nothing new for Temirov. Temirov has been undersized in all of his fights, really. When you watch him, he's an undersized fighter, even for the flyweight division from his length. But he's muscular and he's a great athlete, and I think that he will continue to make it work. So I like Temirov here. I can't go against him, man. I'm excited for the potential that he has, and my gut is telling me that he will continue to deliver. Let's take a look at the betting line. This will be an interesting one here, as it's going to be Charles Johnson, who is the current underdog. He opened up as a -125, and we're seeing action coming the other way. All right, you take a look throughout all the books. You're seeing that action coming in on Temirov. People like what they're seeing from him. This is an interesting one. All right, this is one that I want to talk more about in the prop edition video, and I want to monitor how this line movement goes. But I like Temirov to not only win this fight, but to get another KO. We got a matchup here between two OGs of women's MMA, and Andrea Lee and JJ Aldrich. Aldrich is now 32 years old, and I say that because she's in about her physical prime, and this is a fighter that I've been watching for a long time. When she was a young fighter, I really believed that she was going to be a threat to the fight game, and her career has been a little bit of a letdown, quite honestly. But you think about some of the bigger performances that she's had. She defeated Jillian Robertson. That's not easy to do. Her real standout fight was a fight that she actually lost. That was when she went out there and was picking Macy Barber apart until eventually she was KO'd. Okay, but in that fight early on against Barber, she showcased once again how technical her boxing skills are, and her overall striking is really technical. She can go out there and outclass girls. And throughout the years, we've seen some development with her grappling, of course, as to be expected, and it will be important in a matchup here against Andrea Lee, who's talented and dangerous down there. Okay, in that last fight against Veronica Hardy, even though she lost that, she did snag a round with about 4 minutes of control time down in the mat there. And she has to be on her P's and Q's, because if Andrea Lee gets her down, Lee has shown to be dangerous as far as pulling off subs. And we've seen Aldrich subbed 3 times out of her 7 losses. The majority of fights that she gets finished in come by way of her getting subbed, which is not a surprise in this division. But I don't expect to see a knockout take place either way. We've only seen 1 knockout loss between both women here, and that was on the Aldrich side. But I think that it will be Aldrich that gets the better of the striking exchanges. I think that she just has more pop on her strikes. She's just more fundamentally sound, and I could see her tagging up Lee. We've seen Lee landed on throughout the years. She has this very interesting fighting style where she's very stiff and upright, and she's kind of bobbing and weaving like Tyson a little bit at times, switching stances. And I could see Aldrich landing on her, and I think that Aldrich should look to keep this fight standing and get the better of those exchanges. And you have to worry a little bit about the volume that Lee will put out there. Lee will push the pace. She'll throw the kicks out there and all that, but I still favor that type of fight going towards Aldrich's way, and I think that she can keep this fight standing. I'm going to lean towards my old girl Aldrich's way. I'm going to say she gets her hand raised. Lee, 36 years old. She's getting up there in age. She comes into this fight on a massive losing streak, although we all had her defeating Macy Barber. Okay, so that's kind of the X factor there. And then the other X factor is that all the losses that she's been taking as of recently are against solid competition, right? And Vivian Orujao, Natalia Silva, Miranda Maverick, and the Montana De La Rosa, which was a close loss, right? That came down to a split decision. So I don't think that the losing streak necessarily explains who she is as a fighter, but I'm going to say that she loses once again. I'm going to say Aldrich gets the better of those striking exchanges as she keeps it standing. This fight goes to a decision, and Aldrich gets her hand raised. Right now, she's around a 2-1 favorite. We're seeing her right around a -195. I do not see a lot of value on that line. I think it's a much closer fight than the odds are saying. So that you got to be cautious there. Okay, be careful. This could be a trap fight if you're targeting Aldrich. We got a real fun fight here in the welterweight division between Danny Barlow and Sam Patterson, two DWCS alumni. And you could say we got a stylistic clash here, as Sam Patterson has shown to have the majority of his success using his submission skills. On the other hand, it's Danny Barlow that's looking to go out there and take your head off. One key factor that stands out to me in this fight, in this matchup, is the fact that we've seen Sam Patterson be exploited with being KO'd, right? We've seen him knocked out twice before. You take a look at both of his losses. They do come by way of KO. And the biggest one, of course, was his UFC debut match against Yanal Ashmos, where he was finished in just 1 minute and 15 seconds. He was also knocked out in the first round in just his second pro fight back in 2017. That took place in the first round as well. So the issue there is that we've seen one of the strengths of Barlow be exploited on Patterson, whereas Patterson's strength of those jiu-jitsu skills, we haven't seen Barlow be exploited in that way just yet. I would say that we haven't really seen him tested there too much, but in his last fight, he went out there, he dug deep against Nikolay Valentinnikov, who's a decently well-rounded fighter. He brought in the wrestling attack, and it was Barlow that actually had more control time in that fight than Nikolay, as he had 1 minute and 16 seconds of control time. Both fighters were 0-2 in takedowns, but it was Barlow that fell on top there for a little bit. And against Josh Quinlan, that was a major target of mine. He got that third round KO, displaying how silky smooth he is with his striking. And that was parlayed off the DWCS performance, where he went out there and knocked out the fellow statesman in Raheem Forrest. That was an exciting fight. They went out there to throw down, and it was Barlow that landed. He is a dangerous striker. He carries serious fight-ending ability in his hands, and I think that we will see him land KOs throughout the years in the octagon. I had somebody message me recently, a couple days ago, asking me if this was an 8-unit max play target of mine. They were saying, are you going to have an 8-unit maxer on Danny Barlow? I'll let you guys know right now that's not the case. I'm not at all going to be targeting him as a maxer, especially where this line is. I think that Patterson, although he had those 2 blemishes, one of them was very early on in his career, and I think that the Ashmos loss was just kind of a learning experience. It was a tough learning experience, but I think that one was just an off day for him, and I think that we're seeing that he is game, and he's going out there and he's subbing these fighters very early on. He subbed Johan Linnes and Kiefer Crosby both in the first round. And I know those are lower level fighters, but my gut is telling me that Sam Patterson will go out and continue to do that against fighters in the UFC. All right, he did it on DWCS against Vinicius Sensi. He's a problem there, man. He's very long, and he knows how to find those finishes. And I also want to just bring up the frames real quick, because it's usually Danny Barlow that's the much more rangy fighter when he's matched up. And here, Sam Patterson will actually have the 1-inch reach advantage, and it's Sam Patterson that's an inch taller. I think that makes this fight even more exciting. At the end of the day, I have to lean towards Danny Barlow's way based on what we talked about in the beginning of this segment, just because we've seen Patterson KO'd. We haven't seen Barlow yet be submitted or really be dominated down in the mat, and I know he's grinding hard with that aspect of his game. So I'll lean Danny Barlow's way, and I'll say that he may find that KO. That's what he does, man, and it's very likely. I'll have to lean that way if you want me to give you that exact method of victory, but I wouldn't be surprised if he wins a decision either way. But I will also say I will not be surprised if the dog shows up here. All right, so I want to be clear here. I don't think there's a lot of value on a -320 line on Danny Barlow. I have this fight capped much closer than that. I think that this fight should be somewhere around the range of Danny Barlow being like a -175 favorite. I think that's Sam Patterson's game, and do not be shocked if he shows up and gets his hand raised or even finds a sub here. The absolute junkyard dog, Danny Silva, steps back into the cage. He's taking on Lucas Almeida, who comes into this fight off of a huge and very much needed victory where he went out there and defeated Timothy Kuwamba. If he would have lost that fight, he would have been on a 3-fight losing skid. And in my opinion, we probably wouldn't have seen him in the UFC ever again when you take a look at his age and where he was at in his career. So that was a huge victory for him. Now, Danny Silva is going to be in his face from the moment the bell rings. How is he going to be able to handle it? Where Almeida has some strengths going into this matchup is the fact that he has displayed plus power and dangerous striking at times. Even in the beginning of that DWCS fight against Daniel Zellweger, where he came up short and didn't get the contract on the night, he took that first round, and we saw right off the rip that he's dangerous there. He was landing big strikes. We saw him knock out Michael Trezano in his UFC debut, got the finish there in the third round, and we've seen that he is a decent striker there. And the potential issue from the Silva side is that he is so willing to take damage as he looks to inflict it on you that you have to believe eventually it's going to catch up with him. We know he has a granite chin, but eventually you have to feel that some of these high-level fighters are going to catch a KO on him. I mean, take a look at the numbers. 9.47 strikes absorbed per minute while he's landing 8.3. So he's absorbing more than the ridiculous amount that he's landing, okay? I will say this, though. In those two fights where he was slightly absorbed on more against Joshua Culibao and Angel Pacheco, he was landing the much more substantial strikes, okay? He really sits down on his hooks. He comes forward, he plots heavy, and he lands big strikes. So even in a fight where Almeida may outvolume him, I still think that the substantial strikes that are being landed, once again, will be from the Danny Silva side. Okay, he's a pit bull, right? He's a junkyard dog. He's going to come forward. He's going to be landing the strikes that's going to have us on the edge of our couch jumping up. The judges are going to feel that same type of intensity on those strikes. He just doesn't want to get caught with that one big shot that maybe eventually hands him his first ever KO loss. Okay, we haven't seen him finish thus far. He's just 28 years old. You have to understand that the mileage that's on his vehicle is going to be accelerated. Okay, yeah, he's tough, he takes damage well, but you start fighting like this every single time, eventually that chin is going to wear out early on in his career. Okay, so I don't expect him to be a fighter. I mean, you never know, but I don't expect him to be a fighter that's fighting with this same type of style into his mid-30s. Okay, we'll see how the career goes, but right now, he is one of the most exciting fighters coming up in this division from an entertainment standpoint, and I will back him to win this fight. I think the pressure is just going to be too much. I think that he is going to be the bully when the bell rings. He suffers from a little bit of Jeremy Smith syndrome, that JSS. You guys know what I'm talking about. Every time I tell you about these fighters that have that JSS, you see them go out there and showcase it, right? We were recently talking about that. Who was the fighter we said just had JSS recently? He went out there and just stormed the opposition right off the rip. What a bully. But who was that, guys? You guys know what I'm talking about. Keep tabs on those JSS notes. And you guys know I slipped up by not mentioning the giraffe syndrome on Sam Patterson, who is actually the emperor of giraffe syndrome. But he doesn't really have to worry about getting caught in a sub by Danny Barlow. That giraffe neck will be just fine. But it could be an issue when it's up on the Pez dispenser and it gets teed off on. Just to highlight that real quick. But it's Danny Silva here. That's a 2-1 favorite. He's a -200 favorite. Not a ton of value on that line. I still would side with him. I really like what I've been seeing from him, but he needs to be a little bit more defensively sound. And I know he's been putting in a lot of work with Cub Swanson. Cub Swanson is a fighter. There's a reason why he has been having the late success in his career. He always talks about not battling hard in the gym, not taking too much damage, sparring, and being a smart fighter even in his fights, not taking a lot of damage, using his footwork. And as he's Danny Silva's mentor, I expect to see Silva start to take some of that in. So that'll be a great thing for him to take his game to the next level. Montana De La Rosa takes on Luana Carolina. Carolina is on a 3-fight winning streak. She's starting to get some respect put on her name, as we'll get to the betting odds here in a second. Okay, but the main thing that stands out to me in this matchup is the fact that Montana De La Rosa, although she has taken her fair share of losses in the octagon, she has fought much higher level of opponents throughout the years, right? And she's still just 30 years old. She had a very early start to her UFC career, coming off The Ultimate Fighter. Of course, she's the husband of Mark De La Rosa, the former UFC fighter, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt coach over there. And just take a look at the level of losses that she's had as of recently. She lost to JJ Aldrich, Tatiana Suarez. She got submitted by Suarez. She lost to Macy Barber. Vivian Araujo back in the day, Andrea Lee. I mean, these are all recognizable names, even dating back to when she kicked her career off, losing to Mackenzie Dern over at Legacy FC on the regional scene. Cynthia Calvillo, Nico Montano lost. Remember, Nico won the Ultimate Fighter there, so even though she never really ended up being too much, I mean, these are all respectable names, while there are some scattered respectable W's. And even in some of those fights where she's lost, she has shown that she's game, right? She has a wrestling background. I believe she did wrestle in high school, trains over in Colorado. We've seen the boxing being worked on. She's very tough. She could have her nose hanging on the side of her face and she's still marching forward. So that's one thing that you have going for her too. She won't give up on you. She's very tough. On the other hand, even though Luana's been looking good, take a look at the level of competition here. Lucy Putty-Leva, I used to always try to give her some credit. I know she's had success, off and on, leaving the UFC, coming back, having success outside the octagon. But I think at this point in time, it's safe to say that she's just a lower level fighter and it's not even deserving to be in the UFC. Storlienko, no, we're not going there. Ivana Petrovic, a fighter that hasn't proven anything. She had losses to Joanne Wood and Molly McCann. The Molly McCann loss was a really devastating one. She got finished, got hit with that spinning back elbow. Okay, I mean, she really dropped the ball there. The biggest victory she had was against Lupi Garines, who Lupi, although another fighter that I once had a lot of respect for, she continues to drop those important fights. And that was a fight where Lupi, I believe, took that fight on short notice and came up in weight. She was extremely undersized. Okay, so take that into consideration there. And then she got submitted by Ariane Lipsky. And Ariane Lipsky is a fighter that Montana De La Rosa finished up via ground and pound in the second round. So a common opponent there. All right, so I just wanted to kind of highlight that the numbers as far as wins and losses don't give you the full picture of what's going on here. I like the toughness of Montana De La Rosa, and I know that she is a hard worker. I expect to see the best version of herself coming into this fight at 30 years old, off of the Andrea Lee victory, and she has the frame to hang with Carolina. When we've seen Carolina have success, she's really used that range advantage, kind of striking from the outside. I think Montana De La Rosa can hang with her there, as she just has a 1-inch reach disadvantage. She's actually an inch taller. Okay, she's a long fighter too for this division. I'm going to side with Montana here. Let's take a look at the odds for this fight, where we will see that Montana De La Rosa is going to be a slight underdog. Okay, she's right around a plus 105. Not a lot of line movement going on here. It's Carolina that is the slight favorite. I kind of expected that would be the case based on the fact that she comes in on that 3-fight winning streak. She's just 31 years old too. She's starting to put it together. But the more I dive into the tape and the level of opponents, I have no problem with siding with De La Rosa. This should be a very close fight. I'm going to say De La Rosa wins via split decision. We got the heavyweights throwing down. We got the former Jacksonville Jaguars defensive end, Austen Lane, multiple Dana White's Contender Series veteran who's coming off a victory. Believe it or not, if you guys forgot about that W, we'll talk about that here in a second. He's taking on Mario Pinto, who's coming off a victory on DWCS. He had that early KO victory. He's just 26 years old. And of course, as the heavyweight division is not the most deep, you have to kind of look at him as one of the more intriguing prospects in this division coming into the UFC. He shows fight-ending ability. He's been knocking dudes out, 5 KOs out of his 9 victories. And guess what? When Austen Lane is losing fights, he's being KO'd. In his 5 losses, he was knocked out in all of them. Of course, we remember what Justin Tafa did to him as he got redemption after he poked him in the eye the first time around. And then in the Johanta Diniz fight, Lane did have those early takedowns, but eventually when the fight started back up on the feet in the second round, he was knocked out there. And that's the key, right? When you think of that first round where he had success against Diniz, using his speed and kind of tackling ability to get fighters down, right? And he has good cardio, right? That's what he did in the Robelis Despain victory, where he grinded him out there. If you're not up to par there, he can potentially exploit you. Okay, if you're not even up to par, if you're low level, he can exploit you there. So the real question here is Pinto low level there? And I don't believe that he is. All right, and I'll tell you why. If you pull up some of his tape on YouTube, because you're not going to be able to get too much from the Lucas Camacho fight. That fight didn't last that long. Hit him with the nasty hook, the left hook there, finished him up. But, if you take a look at the Benjamin Sihik fight, which took place back in 2023 at Levels Fight League 10, that's on YouTube. That's a fun one. And you got to see his footwork and his takedown defense tested for quite a bit as that fight went to the third round. Sihik looked like a wild barbarian that was jumping out of the bushes after he had a couple pints and there were some Romans coming into the neighborhood. I mean, he was a wild man. Pull that fight up, you guys will see what I'm talking about. But I like the fact that with all that wild type of attack that he was using, even trying to pull guard and all that, we saw that the youngster Pinto was very grounded and he defended it all well until he eventually stuffed the takedown, got on top, and he finished up Sihek in that fight. And I could easily see Pinto stuffing takedowns and getting his own ground and pound type of finish as lane's all sloppy. But even more so, I could see before we get into that type of exchange, I could see Pinto just landing on Lane as he enters and getting a knockout once again. It's interesting because Austen Lane, when he gets finished, it's very similar to when we see Greg Hardy get finished, which I know that they fought. Greg Hardy knocked out Austen Lane in that first fight in DWCS, and both are former football players, although Greg Hardy was a former Pro Bowler with the Cowboys. But when both of them get hit, when you see these football players get hit, it's like they're jumping all around and they just don't like it. And even though Austen Lane has had a good amount of pro experience at this point in time, he still doesn't seem to be comfortable getting hit with big shots. I think that Pinto will get him out of there. I think he gets the knockout, and it's most likely going to happen early on. But it could happen late too, but I'll take the earlier KO. He's a -350. It's a higher line for a young fighter that's not extremely tested, and Austen Lane has gone out there as a big underdog and has showed up, like we said in that Spain fight. But I would lean towards being more comfortable even siding with the -350 on Pinto. I think that he finds the finish as well. So this could be a fight that we talk about on that Prop Edition video. Going into this card, this matchup here is the favorite to be fight of the night. We got Nasrat, Haqparast taking on Esteban, Ribovics in the lightweight division. Ribovics is coming off of that phenomenal performance against Daniel Zellweger. You guys know I had that ranked as my fight of the year. That was a crazy one. That was a crazy card for me, that UFC 306 event. We cashed in a major way. And one of my plays was that fight to go to the distance. If you guys can imagine, if you remember, Zellweger was almost finished multiple times. And that was just, what a fight that was. And I think that really cemented Ribovics as a legit contender in this division. When you take a look at his age at just 28 years old, and he's getting better and better. He was coming into that fight off of the phenomenal Terrence McKinney KO, where he hit him with that head kick, and he's just seeing things in slow motion in there. His lone loss was a last-minute matchup against Loik Rashabov, who was a proven PFL fighter, much more experienced and mature fighter, and he had success in that fight as well. It was Loik that looked to really push him up against the cage and kind of grinded out a victory there. You throw those two in the cage again, I mean, it's going to be Ribovics that's closing the gap as he gets more and more experience, and he has a much higher ceiling, in my opinion. I'm very excited for the future of Ribovics. And check it out. On the other side, Nasrat's just 29 years old, so although he's been more battle-tested and has more octagon experience, he's still a young buck, man. He hasn't even cracked the 30 marker. He's coming into this fight on a 4-fight winning streak, although I know some of you guys did have him losing against Jared Gordon. I saw some feedback as of recently in regards to me talking about that fight. It was a close fight. Gordon's a tough outing, okay, but before that, he knocks out Jamie Malarkey, defeats Landon Quinones, who, that was a very fun fight, man. They went at it. Make no mistake, even though there was a lot of back and forth, it was Haqparast that was clearly a step ahead of the youngster there. Defeated John McDessie. All right, he had those 2 losses against Bobby Green and Dan Hooker. Both those fights went to a decision, and then a little bit before that, he was knocked out against Drew Dober. He came into that fight as the favorite. A lot of people were very high on him, and I just want to say, you know, dating back to the Mark Diakase victory, that's when people started to really get a lot of respect for him. Mark Diakase was a huge favorite, and it was Nasrat that was very game, went out there and showcased the potential that he had at a young age. And I still think that he has a world of potential, and this is a very close fight. We're going to get to the odds here in a second. It's Nasrat with the 2-inch reach advantage. I expect this to be a striking affair. We've seen both of these fighters constantly welcome those types of fights. So you mix them together, and I think that you see them go at it. And I just feel a little bit more comfortable right now siding with Ribovics because he's thriving in those types of fights. Okay, and I guess you could say so has Nasrat, but when you break down the tape, it's Ribovics that's just a little bit more technical and compact. We've seen Haqparast at times be landed on. I mean, you take a look at the numbers. He's being landed on at 5.65 strikes per minute. And you could kind of say the same thing for Ribovics, though, as he's being landed on at 4.95. Okay, there's a lot of similarities between these two fighters So it's really hard for me to say why I'm going with Ribovics. But he just looks a little bit more fine-tuned to me. And I think that he'll be the fighter when it's all said and done that has a little bit of a higher ceiling. I think you'll see the bigger victories on his resume. And I think that he'll have Nasrat Haqparast on his resume with the victory over him. So this is a great fight. Let's go take a look at the betting odds for it, because that's really what this is about here. Because I don't think that Ribovics should be a minus 245, and he already was as high as a minus 270. I do not believe that should be the case. This is a fight that could easily play out close as they're slinging at each other back and forth. The one thing you have going for the Ribovics side is he has not been finished yet. He's shown to be very durable. So even if they're really going at it and there's a high pace, you don't have to worry so much about him being KO'd. Well, on the other hand, we have seen Haqparast KO'd. We talked about that Dober loss. So Ribovics, we haven't seen that from him yet. And I will side with him. When you mix it all together, I will side with him. But the value is on the underdog here. That line should not be that wide. When you're talking Hyder, Amil, you're talking about one of the most overlooked fighters from an entertainment standpoint. Okay, when he is in there, you guys got to be amped up to see him perform. It's must-see television. He's taking on William Gomis here. This is a step up in competition. This is a huge fight for Hyder. He's 10-0. He's still undefeated. He trains with Gil Melendez over at El Nino Training Center. He's part of the Scrap Pack. And you see that he brings in that same type of toughness and gameness to the cage. Okay, you could have his back. You could be looking to sink a finish in on him. He's not going to give up. He's going to find a way to get out of there. When the fight picks up in the next round, he'll find a finish on you, as we saw in the Chase Gibson fight. That was actually the last fight that he had before the DWCS opportunity that he had against Emra Sunmez, okay? Do yourself a favor and go pull up the Chase Gibson fight. Took place over in the LFA. What a war. After the back and forth action that took place in the first round, the second round kicks off, and he does finish up Gibson actually almost immediately. If you guys remember, it was about 11 seconds into that second round. Gibson just broke down. Emil shows to have a solid gas tank. He's very well-rounded. He can get on top of you with his wrestling. He could rain down ground and pound on you. And then on the feet, he could really throw down, as we saw in his last fight as he took on Zhongyang Lee, who's a talented Korean fighter. If you guys want to also run back some entertaining film, go run back that fight, as it was Emil that hit him with a 38-punch combo. And it's comical if you listen to the broadcast team. They're all jumping out of their shorts. They're screaming on the mic. Auntie Sanko was, she needed to get a towel out there for herself. That was a fun one. And listen, Hyder Emil, like I said, he's game though, man. He'll sit there in the pocket with you. He could take your strikes. He has a granite chin, and then he'll land those accurate strikes on you. He comes out a little loopy with the strikes. It's not like he's the most technical striker, okay? But he'll fight out of the southpaw stance at times, and he's very accurate with his strikes. And if William Gomis plays that game, I do believe that he will be in danger of being finished. But where Gomis has shown to be a very good fighter is that he is very athletic. He's very hard to find. But when he's in there, you take a look at the numbers, and he's only being landed on at 1.6 strikes per minute. So if Gomis is smart, he's going to continue to look to implement those types of tactics, fighting from the outside, using his speed and athleticism. That's where he has a strength. Okay, but it's not going to be that easy to avoid the pressure of Emil. Emil's going to look to make this a brawl, and Gomis is really going to have to be on his bike. Yes, it's very realistic he can do that. Take a look at the numbers here again, though. Once again, it's crazy. Now, Emil's numbers are very skewed due to all the damage that he landed in that last fight. So he's landing 6.31 strikes per minute. He's only absorbing 2.23. I think he's very well-rounded, and I think he's very live to get a victory here, as you guys kind of probably eyed I was going to go that way. Gomis is the favorite. We're going to get to the line in 1 second. I just want to talk a little bit more about what Emil brings to the table here. He's 34 years old. I say he's in the prime of his career right now. Doesn't have a lot of mileage on him with just 10 pro victories. The time is now for him, okay? Every fight for a fighter like Emil at his age is do or die, all right? I mean, yeah, he could lose this fight and still have another entertaining fight and the next one and hang around for a couple more years. But if he wants to really make a run in the featherweight division, you can't afford to take any L's here. William Gomis can lose this fight and still put it together. He's just 27 years old, and he's on a hell of a winning streak as well. But he has room to make an error, all right? And He's coming off that big split decision victory against Joanderson Brito. For the record, I did feel that he won that fight. I know some of you guys were going crazy when the decision was announced. A lot of people had Brito mixed in a parlay. And let me just say this in regards to that fight, because this is a good time to bring it up. I know a lot of you guys obviously know this, but I had a comment in my last video where somebody asked me, when I say the value is on that fighter, that means they're going to win the fight, right? Somebody said that. Let me just explain that to you. When I say the value is on that fighter, it doesn't mean they're going to win the fight for sure. I wish that was the case. That'd be great because you're getting plus action, right? Which means you're getting more bang for your buck. Okay. No, when I say the value is on them, it's just per where the betting line is, you're better off long-term targeting that fighter, I would say, if they were to fight 100 times or so. And when Gomis fought against Brito, he was as high as a plus 260 underdog. That was a fight that put some good money in my pocket. Now, it wasn't an official play, but that was a moment in time where I was in the lab and I wanted to cough some money up on a fight. I was just kind of bored. I wanted to be interested. Maybe I was waiting for some of my official plays that were later down the card. And when I'm looking at that fight, I'm like, okay, where can I put my money in regards to this fight? There was no way I was targeting Brito where that line was. And the value was on the dog in Gomis, as we talked about in that segment when we recorded it. And, he came through, right? It was a close fight. But when you're talking about getting plus 260 odds in a matchup like that, that's how you profit long-term, guys. That's what it's about. You have to be targeting these types of dogs occasionally. You don't always have to target them, but in the right spot where the line is off, you have to target the dogs there. Okay, now we take a look at the line in regards to this specific matchup. Amil is a plus 172. I, without a doubt, feel the betting value is on Amil. This fight should be closer. Amil is a bona fide winner. He rises to the occasion all the time. You're getting plus 170 odds on him. That's where the value is, in my opinion. And I'm actually going to take him straight up to win this fight. Okay. Maybe Gomis shows up once again and he's just a more athletic fighter. He's a better striker. He has a length advantage here. Okay. He's the longer fighter. He's taller, has a reach advantage. It could play out like that. But give me the plus action on Amil. And he's funny that Gil Melendez trains him because he kind of looks like him and has a similar fighting style. But he is exciting. I'm backing him. I hope he wins this fight. And I think he very well could. Middleweight division, we have Cody Brundage taking on Julian Marquez. I think that this matchup really is a recipe for us to see something wild take place. I think that this is a fight where we should see a finish. You take a look at a fighter like Julian Marquez, who has now been knocked out in 3 fights in a row. Okay, in his last fight, he was knocked out in just 20 seconds by Zachary Reese. And then when you take a look at the success that he's had, which was way back in the day, his last victory took place 4 years ago against Sam Alvey, where he caught him in that rear naked choke in the second round. He submitted Maki Patolo before that, hit him with an anaconda choke. Okay, so he has shown to have a submission arsenal. Even the prior victory he had before those two was also a front choke that he had against Darren Stewart, which Darren Stewart, I think there's some buzz about him fighting Darren Till, his fellow countryman, and probably in a boxing match or something like that. And let me just highlight the Dana White's Contender Series fight. You want to talk about an action-packed fight where we're talking about the Hyder Amil stuff and all that. Pull up the Phil Hawes versus Julian Marquez fight. That was crazy. Phil Hawes almost had him out of there. Hawes kind of blew his load going for the finish. And then it was Marquez that hit him with a nasty head kick against the cage. And that was the beginning of him kicking off his UFC career. I think that Marquez has kind of had more success than he really should have. I mean, I guess that's kind of disrespectful, but he doesn't really seem to come in great shape. I've seen him breathing heavy a lot in the past, and some of the fights that he's even prevailed in. He's had up and down type of performances, and now coming into this fight on a 3-fight losing skid, creeping up on 35 years old. I don't know where his motivation is, and I don't really trust him. On the other hand, Brundage is just 30 years old, so he has a lot more fight years to give us, and obviously he wants to be performing in the UFC, right? I mean, he can go off to other promotions, but I mean, you guys are hearing what's going on in the PFL. All these fighters went out of there. What other organizations really are out there at this point in time? And the reason why I bring that up is because he's a young fighter. He's entering his physical prime, but if he loses this fight, this very well could be his last opportunity in the UFC. When you take a look at what's been going on with him in the cage, the Abdul Razak Al Hassan fight, he was possibly en route to being finished. I don't want to completely say he was out because Al Hassan is a fighter that gasses out drastically as the fights progress. And if he didn't finish Brundage could have came back and got the W there. But Al Hassan was putting it on him, and then he hit him to the back of the head. So that the fight ended up being a no contest. Bo Nickel submitted him, although we have to say Brundage put up a pretty good fight early on there before he was finished. He had the 2 victories, but listen, the Jacob Malkoun fight, that was another fight where he was being dominated and he was en route to losing, and Jacob Malkoun gets hit with the illegal elbow to the back of the head, giving Brundage the W. So that really wasn't a W. Before that, he loses to Sed Dumas, Rodolfo Vieira, Michał Oleksiejczak. There's been a lot of losses going on, and I think if he loses this fight, this will be the end of his run in the UFC. So he's going to be very motivated. I trust his motivation more so than Marquez. And I'll say this, we have seen Brundage land wild type of KOs in the octagon before, right? The Tresean Gore KO in the first round there, that was a big one for him. I know the Zachary Reese was a little bit more unorthodox as he slammed him on his head. But what I'm saying is that Julian Marquez comes into this fight being KO'd in 3 fights in a row. And I think that Brundage has enough firepower to potentially hand him another KO loss. And listen, I definitely try not to do this too much because I try to be professional, but at times I have connections to certain fighters in certain ways. And Cody Brundage is a dude. It's always up in the story, checking out my stories. He's always showing love to some of my posts. On the other hand, Marquez is a fighter that I had a run-in with way back in the day, back in 2020. And he's kind of a smart aleck, if you will. He really wasn't the most friendly dude. So I am rooting for Brundage, but I think that he very realistically can win this fight. Okay, I mean, I wouldn't feel comfortable backing Marquez coming into this match on a 3-fight losing skid, being KO'd in all of them, getting up there in age. And Brundage has that collegiate wrestling background. I think he has better cardio conditioning. He has his issues, but he's younger and he has more time and more potential to have sharpened them up. Let's take a look at the betting line. Brundage is going to be the dog here. He's right around a +140, and he actually opened up around a +115. So the action is coming in on Marquez. People feel this is a good bounce back spot for Marquez. I understand the mindset on that, but I'm siding with Brundage, and I really hope he gets that KO and flatlines Marquez and hands Marquez his walking papers. Hey, you guys, I just wanted to take a quick second to thank you for tuning into the show. If you guys can, please smash that like button and subscribe to the channel. I have some huge aspirations and some big things planned in the fight world. So it all starts with you guys though, man. If you guys can give me a little bit of help by going and following me on my social media, liking these videos and subscribing if you haven't, it really means a lot to me. And that takes us to the main event where we have Manel Kape taking on Asu Almabayev, ranked flyweight action. As I said in the intro to this video, I believe this is essentially a title eliminator on both sides. Definitely if Kape wins, but if Almabayev went out there and defeated Kape, he would then be on a 5-fight winning streak with respectable victories over fighters like Kape, Matheus Nicolau, which was his more previous victory and fight coming into this match. Victories over Ode Osborne, Jose Johnson, and CJ Vergara. Take those for what you will, but the Nicolau and Kape, they carry some serious weight, and depending on how he would do it, right? I'm just throwing this out there to kick off this segment. If he was to go out there and finish Kape, I mean, forget about it. You're talking about him being next in line for sure. You take a look at the top of this division. Pantoja will be taking on Kai Kara-France, who is still ranked towards the top of this division, even though he's been losing left and right, but losing to high-level fighters. Brandon Moreno has already lost twice against Pantoja. That's going to be a very hard match for the UFC to make, even if he goes out there and continues to win. Royval is ranked number 1, but he did just withdraw from the fight on this card against Kape. So, I mean, there's just a lot of signs pointing towards that being the case. And Ulanbekov needs to win some more fights. So Almabayev is over here at 8 and Kape is at 6. This is a huge fight for the future of this division. And this is going to be a tough fight for Almabayev. And I'll tell you why, because Almabayev is a fighter that has a lot of success with his grappling, first and foremost. And Manel Kape, that's very hard to be taken down, as we saw even in that Makayev fight when he had a broken toe. I mean, he has lightning fast reflexes. He has posted a 77% takedown defensive ratio in the octagon. Even though people don't really look at him as that type of fighter, he trains with a lot of those Dagestani fighters. Okay, so he gets in that type of grappling work. And he's only been submitted once. And you take a look at that submission loss. It came by way of Kyoji Horiguchi, who is a phenomenal fighter. And that fight took place a long time ago, also highlighting the level of competition that he's been in there with before he even signed with the UFC, right? He has a knockout victory over Kai Asakura. He knocked out Takeya Mizugaki. If you guys remember him, Dominic Cruz had a knockout victory over him too, the former UFC fighter. Okay, but he's been in there with big names, man. Knocked out Ian McCall. Ian McCall, one of the pioneers of this division, arguably should have been the inaugural UFC flyweight champion, right? He had some battles with Demetrius Johnson, some very close fights. I was there live for that first one. And, just the point I'm making is that Kape has a world of experience. He's not going to be easy to be grappled and controlled. And then that's an issue here because standing, it's Kape that's going to have a 4-inch reach advantage. He's a taller fighter, has an inch height advantage, if you will, there. And he's the more technical and better striker. And I expect him to get the better of those exchanges. And that's not saying that Almabayev is a bad striker, but Kape is really, really good. I was just at his last fight live in Tampa, drove over to Tampa to see him get that 3rd round finish over Bruno Silva. I love the energy that he brings into the cage. I love when he grabs the mic and starts, getting on it, spitting that heat on the mic. As he did after the victory over Felipe dos Santos. That was a fun fight too. But when you're talking about athleticism, speed, agility, and all that, you're talking about pretty much numero uno here at Manel. I mean, this guy is an absolute video game character, and I just don't see Almabayev getting the better of those striking exchanges, and I don't see him having enough success with the grappling. Now, this is a 5-round fight. It's a main event. We'll see how the cardio and conditioning goes, but Kape seems to check off those boxes very well also. So, I got to lean towards my boy's way here. Manel Kape, who's a fighter that I have backed throughout the years, and I'm really high on him, and I think that he should be the next fighter to fight for the belt. That would be a great fight. I want to see him face off with Pantoja if that all can come to fruition. Obviously, Pantoja needs to defeat France, which he should. Kape should win this fight. I think we should see that be the follow-up match there. And right now, Manel Kape is right around a 2.5 to 1 favorite. He's right around a -240 with some slight action coming in the other way on Almabayev. Based on how wide this line is, I guess I'm not surprised, but I wouldn't be surprised if it circles back. I have Kape capped. Right around a -240. I think the line's accurate right now where it is. So it's right on the fence. I mean, he's deserving of being the type of favorite that he is. Remember, I told you guys, he should have defeated Makayev. If that wasn't for that toe injury, and I still thought he probably edged that fight out anyway. It was super close. Imagine him if he didn't have the injury to his foot. Stuffing Makayev's takedowns. He couldn't really throw the volume that he wanted. Now you get a healthy version of him here. He gets his hand raised, and I'll say via unanimous decision. All right, guys, that's going to wrap this one up. As always, I try to leave you guys with a little bit of positive feedback, if you will, positive information that may be able to benefit some of you guys out there. Even if it helps one of you, that makes me happy. And this is a simple one, but something I've been doing as of recently that I really feel has made me feel better. First and foremost, eating healthy. Make sure you guys go download that Bobby approved app and scan everything you're buying and make sure you guys are eating healthy and understand why certain things should be avoided, which that's a great app, guys. Go check out the Bobby approved app. And then another thing that I've been doing is I've been cutting out with eating very late. I used to always double up on my meals and go back for snacks at the end of the night. And now I'm getting in my last meal right around 9 o'clock or so. And it's helping me have better nights of sleep. And I feel like when I wake up, I am more energized. I feel better. I feel more clear-headed. And I feel like I'm attacking the following day better. So if any of you guys are constantly going to the fridge late at night, in the beginning, it may be hard to avoid doing that because my stomach was grumbling, if that's the right word, rumbling. And it was a grumpy stomach that was rumbling. And you guys will go through a little bit of that, but you will also start to be able to handle it better. You'll get used to not eating late at night. So try that out and see how it makes you feel. That's just something I'll throw out to you guys. And as always, I will continue to try to throw any positive information that I've gathered throughout the years. And you guys hit us up with some positive feedback in the comment section. You guys know I appreciate you guys greatly. Thank you guys for taking this ride with me as we head to the top here. Please smash that like button, subscribe to the channel. Signing out, Teller.
The Teller.